and I just want to say thank you for everyone who came out. I know it's ironic we're doing a program on the intersection of legal work and movement work and organizing, and of course we managed to schedule this on the same night as the Behind the Walls Committee is something going on. I don't know what that was, but I was just saying that we managed to schedule this also on the same night as DARE is having their Behind the Walls Committee, Rhode Island Anti-War Committee is having their meeting, and also PrYSM Laboral is meeting at the George Wiley Center on a workers' rights program. So there's a lot happening in terms of movement stuff here in Providence, Rhode Island this evening. So I'm just really appreciative for everyone who came out. And just so you know you're in the right place, this is a discussion about movement lawyering and how lawyers and legal workers can help to support and work in solidarity with progressive movements for social change, radical movements. And I think oftentimes we think of the legal world as doing direct services work, client work. That's one area of work which is really important and good. And then we also think about strategic litigation where people bring lawsuits to affect social change. And that's also important work, but we're talking about a third very different thing, which is actually movement lawyering. And we have two wonderful speakers on this topic. One of whom is Shannah Kurland, who's on her way here, coming directly from the Providence City Council meeting, which is another thing that's happening tonight, where they're talking about the Providence External Review Authority, which, for those who don't know, is the only civilian oversight board of any law enforcement agency here in the Ocean State. And as probably many of you know, it's really struggled to kind of make that work in the past with some real problems. But it looks like one of our wonderful speakers is showing up right now. And without any further ado, I'm going to turn it over to attorney Jamie Vita, who's going to introduce our other wonderful speaker.
Hi, Jamie Vita, as Ben said, I'm a member of the Rhode Island National Lawyers Guild. I work in the Massachusetts Public Defender's Office, the Fall River office. I got started in New Bedford, probably in some of these photographs they're playing behind me. I met Carl when I was a law student in 2011 at the Guild chapter meeting for my law school. And at the end of the meeting, he said, does anybody here think they want to do public defense, indigent defense, work in public defender's office? And I said, yeah, okay, maybe I do. I got an internship with Carl's office at Roxbury Defenders in Roxbury in Boston. And I'd been a public defender. My first job out of law school was being a public defender. I haven't never had any other job since then. So, and I have Carl to thank for that. And I guess everybody else does too. He's been involved in a ton of stuff. As I said, he was a staff attorney at the Roxbury Defender's Office. He's been the chair of the board of directors of the Massachusetts chapter of the NLG, Water Protectors Legal Collective. Currently, he teaches a course on movement lawyering at Cornell University School of Law. What else? He does so much stuff.
What hasn't?
What hasn't Carl done? Was one of the legal advisors for Occupy Boston. Something else that I got to see him do while I was an intern. I don't think that was strictly speaking on the internship books, but that's fine. Oh God, ACLU. He can tell you more about all the great stuff that he's done. It's too much to keep track of, but he's a wonderful attorney. And just before he comes up and tells you all about movement lawyering, Representative Stewart has something to present to him for all of his wonderful work.
Hi, my name is Representative Jennifer Stewart from Pawtucket, and as someone who through the years has had a first row seat view of movement lawyering, I'm so proud to be here tonight to offer you a citation from the Rhode Island House of Representatives, and on behalf of our chamber, we want to recognize you for your fearless opposition to injustice and your in-depth, I'm going to mispronounce it, but you're saying, I was just going to say you're tireless. Your tireless advocacy for Black liberation, indigenous sovereignty, and environmental social justice. So thank you.
Thank you.
The special envelope.
So I'll start by saying this is not the first time I've gotten a citation in Rhode Island.
Intro for Shannah.
Oh, you're going to do the intro? So
Yeah.
who's going to you're gonna do that?
Yeah, I'm going to do it right now. Well, I'm going to introduce our other speaker now because she's here, fresh from the Providence City Council meeting, and we also might have a little something to recognize Attorney Kurland. So I'm sorry, is it okay?
Yeah, I can go.
Okay. All right.
Surprisingly, we're just collecting ADA complaints. Checking compliance everywhere.
So some of you may have noticed in the slide there's a slide from 2010 when we did the very first National Lawyers Guild meeting here in Rhode Island in many years, decades. And Shannah Kurland was there because at the time she was a student at Roger Williams Law School and helped to form what really was the first NLG chapter in Rhode Island, which was the student chapter at Roger Williams. And I have to say that Shannah is like one of the most tireless, dedicated activists in Rhode Island, certainly in Providence, may hold the record for suing the Providence police. A plaintiff and an attorney, and was instrumental in creating the Providence Community Safety Act, instrumental in forming AMOR, the Alliance to Mobilize Our Resistance, was the former executive director of DARE, I think the second ever executive director of DARE, also worked as the strategic litigation person at Providence Youth Student Movement, PrYSM, a position that I think she kind of imagined and created and is an amazing example of movement lawyering. And also worked with the Olneyville Neighborhood Association and all kinds of things. And it's just a real honor and privilege to have Shannah Kurland here with us today. I know she's super busy. She just came from the Providence City Council, so I just really appreciate you being here, Shannah, and all the amazing work you've done for the people of Providence, particularly those people that are catching hell from the police and systems of oppression. And I think Representative Stewart has something for you as well.
Hi, I'm back again to present to you a citation from the Rhode Island House of Representatives. And this is in recognition of your civil rights advocacy, community organizing, and lifelong pursuit of justice for the disadvantaged and the oppressed here in the Ocean State. So thank you very much for your contributions over the years. And it means so much.
So now we got that out of the way, we'll turn it back over to Carl, and then you can say a few words, and then Shannah can say a few words.
Okay, so just briefly, I didn't know if you were going to intermit with us or we're just on our own up here. Thanks for inviting me. It's good to be back home-ish. As I said, Chris in the front row is my elder, identical twin brother. And we grew up in Washington Park, as we say, and worked for many years in Roger Williams Park, actually. No relation to us as witnesses, but that's where we grew up. And I think a lot of my political views were formed by the Providence Police Department. And their
vile, vicious, aggressive behaviors, like from when we were kids. But to just start off, I'll make an admission about my thoughts on movement lawyering. Even though I started a movement lawyering clinic at Cornell Law School, and I teach students about that for most of my life, overall most of my days now. But I think there really isn't such a thing as movement lawyering. Some of my students go, I want to get a job as a movement lawyer. That's not on LinkedIn. There's not a thing that you go, maybe there's one. But I think it's really much more of it's like Antifa. It's a tactic. That works in more ways than one. But I think it's much more of a tactic. It's the way we go about it, right? So whether someone's a public defender, they're a civil rights lawyer in private practice, suing the police, they're someone who does policy work, most of those things I think you can form and use the idea of movement lawyering to affect real systemic change for people. At least we can try to do that, right? And we need more people trying to do that. But really, I think that there are three ways, I think, when we're thinking about doing legal work for the people that sort of come to mind, and I think they've evolved over time. And the first is direct representation, right? So I can represent, Ben when he throws a brick through the Providence Police Department's window, and I say I can defend you on that case. I can go into court as a public defender or a private defense attorney. I can defend you on the case. So it's direct representation, right? It's the one thing we all think about. And for everyone who's done that in the room, there's a lot. And I'm doing the same case that I've done for 37 times this year, and sometimes it feels burdensome. But that is a job people can do to affect change. And then a lot of times when people do that for a really long time, they go, I want to do bigger change, which I don't think it's bigger than they want to say. I want to do impact litigation, and somehow they feel that will affect more change. And then they start doing that work and go, when you sue the police, or when you sue the CIA, or you sue the administration for doing something, the impact that you have, after you do that for a while, you go, it's very, very difficult to affect change this way, very difficult, right? Maybe even harder to affect change than the sort of one-by-one assembly line of representing poor Black and brown folks with mental health problems, indigenous folks in county and city and state courts and federal courts in a criminal sense. And then people say, but now there's movement lawyering, and it can use those direct representation tactics, it can use those so-called impact litigation tactics, and other things, right? Getting people together to do court support around things, getting people, talking to people about, I don't like the term know your rights, because I think people, if we go right now to Prairie Street in South Providence and talk to a bunch of 14-year-old Black kids who get the crap beat out of them by the police, we're like, do you know that it's your right not to have the crap beat out of you by the police? They know that. They know that better, probably, than we know that, right? They know that it's violative of their rights, because they'll say it when it's happening, and you'll see it on the body camera footage. But I think we can tell people about legal resistance, like tools that people can use the law to resist fascism, racism, sexism, capitalism, and how those things are ineffective, but we can sometimes use those for our benefit or for our protection. So that's my just packaged explanation of what movement lawyering is. And I think it's a way we can try to be creative to use the law for, nowadays it feels to stop things from getting way worse. Like, we ain't making it better, we're just trying to make it less worse. We're trying to make tomorrow less worse than it is today. And then sometimes we can actually affect change for the better. But that's my quickie.
I think that set up the theme that sort of has struck me trying to think about this conversation tonight. So when I was a little baby organizer with DARE, Direct Action for Rights and Equality, for any who might not know, we did a lot of work with an organizing network, C2, Center for Third World Organizing, based out in Oakland, and we would host trainings for young people of color who wanted to develop their organizing skills. And some of them were applying to an internship program, which in the 90s was called Minority Activist Apprenticeship Program. And I remember, during the trainings, we'd look at go through the applications and figure out, who's the good ones? We want to put our dibs on this person or that person for the summer. And we'd look, and there would just be this utter oh, that one wants to be a lawyer. And it was just such a snobby kind of ugh, they're not even worth talking to because they want to be a lawyer. And we all know, and I mean, we were actually literally, our model of organizing, I have handouts that say, when you've lost your campaign, the way to put it on a back burner, one way can be to just find a lawyer and do a lawsuit. So we have this disdain for lawyers. But two things contradicted that. First of all, we had constantly to find lawyers for people because they needed them for something or other. So we can talk all the shit we want about lawyers, but we still needed them. And the other thing is, and I didn't realize this so much later, and having opportunities to learn from people how to do this, that model that was a part of a very, very rigid model of organizing too, where we literally had trainings that distinguished our holy, sacred work from direct service, from electoral work, from community development, those things that aren't organizing. It was all about compartmentalizing and, kind of this hubris, incredibly, about organizing. So when I think being at DARE, it helped me understand it because as we grew, we needed strong people managing administration. And I've seen so many places where there's this oh, that's the admin. That's the admin people. This is for the organizers. But the people who have the community understanding, the people who have the context, the people who have the vision beyond what's our demands how are they gonna be worded for this action, were such a critical part of the team, and with the skills and everything, and there's no way to sort of lift up this is organizing and this is all these other lowly things. And then thinking more about when we would do support, individual one-on-one support for people, and how important that was. So at understanding the mechanisms the system was using to oppress people and how it plays out day to day in people's lives. You can't challenge a system if you don't know how it plays out day to day, right? So it's, what Carl was talking about with the direct representation, that is meaningful. If you've taken the boot off of somebody's throat for a minute or helped them push it off, they're able to do so much more, breathe, for instance, is the first thing, and then whatever else is the potential of being able to live a life without having somebody's boot on your neck. So I started to understand that stuff and did a bunch of different roles too, and finally I think it was when I was at ONA, and we were doing some work similar to a lot of the defense hotline work today. So it was actually called the defense, and a precursor to sort of what Amora is doing now. And constantly they're okay, we need more lawyers, and we were doing a better job at just creating spaces where the organizers that had grown out of their communities all around the world, or the hemisphere at least, were taking on those organizing roles within the institutions. And I thought, okay, you know what, whatever, I've got a degree from Brown, I've got, all this great reading and writing stuff, and I love to argue with people. All right, fine, I'm gonna do law school, because we need more. And it was a real struggle for me, because there were still people really, from back in those days too, right? Yeah, right? No, honestly, it's I'm not becoming a nun, almost that would have been better. So I get to law school, and really it was and it wasn't, I'm walking in, there's a white girl with an Ivy League education, yes, 20 years older, but still it was my scene, and I still felt lost and displaced and everything. So some of what saved my life, I have to say very clearly, is meeting some of the fierce warriors that I treasure today, particularly Lipu Leliemtavise, and a team member from the GO, and Allison Quay, who's got the best protest pictures of anybody. She's gorgeous. If you just look, where's that really beautiful woman? That's Allison, Legal Observing.
Right there.
Oh, is that? Yeah, probably it was, right? She looks good, right? So anyway, and then to that we actually had, and later on Mike was there to cruise, and we had the opportunity to be able to become part of NLG, and Ben was instrumental and got Carl there to help, and Chris, right?
Yes, I was just going to Allison.
Okay, so
There it is, yeah.
So see, now everybody gets like $1 when you spot out, right? So it was finally like, okay, great, movement, lawyering, and just add those 2 words. We got NLG, it's all set, and so I was lucky enough that having those contacts and kind of overview of things, I was able to get a fellowship after law school to design a project with PrYSM. Ben was right about that. But so in consultation with folks there and building off of the Get Your Rights trainings that we've been trying to do, because I got a funny comment on that if there's space for it later. And coming up with this project that was really thoughtful about how do we build, a lot of people figuring it out and discussing it together, how do we build legal support into an organizing movement, right? To help pull people in, to help support the people, to help reveal the issues and pull the knowledge, because folks here who are, is everybody here either a lawyer or working in the legal field? I know we have journalists.
You're not here.
Right, journalism and government and any other things. Okay, so basically, like if you do civil work, the amount of discovery you can get dirt on your enemy galore. I've never understood, why do you get so much more discovery rights when you're trying to sue someone than you do when they're trying to put you in jail for the rest of your life? But that's what the system is, right? So and it was really awesome for a while, but there was still some fundamental problems that made it eventually kind of, okay, I have to step back from it. For one thing, people just give too much weight to the lawyer's authority. And I could think I know how to do all those great things you're supposed to do in meetings, and I can finally learn to shut up and not talk over everyone, almost sometimes. But the people are just going to defer to a lawyer. Let alone if the lawyer's wife has, a fancy education, et cetera, So that was challenging. And then the results are more sexy and exciting to the media, to a lot of people. And so it became too much like of a tail wagging the dog. So I became frustrated. You can't include organizing or a legal element in community organizing, and that's not true either. I think there are places, there's different models, and it's just there's things about it that can work and a lot of things about it that can't work. And I'd love to just audit your class and get the readings.
You're coming in and
something.
speaking. That's what's going to happen.
I'm going to sit in and listen to it. But I think what it really made, a couple things I want to think about it. One of the most helpful things I heard and it was from a later director at DARE, when I was frustrated in law school. Oh my God, it's not a headache, it's my brain literally hurts, right? And just that, or people are saying the most fucked up things in class, and how do I not hit somebody? And he said, think of it as a trade school. It's a trade school. You're there, don't get any more emotional about it than, if you're at New England Tech and learning about, and you're learning to be a mechanic, hydraulic mechanics. Somebody in your class is going to piss you off, but you're not going to be it's not going to drive you crazy all day, all night. So thinking about it as a trade school, a trade helps us understand why our work can be valuable to the movement or not. Same as somebody who's a skilled bookkeeper, somebody who is a plumber. In Uruguay, I remember hearing about architects that were part of the people's movement to design housing that the people were demanding and winning, and that's an architect. So, movement architecture, right, or architecting. So with that, I think the bottom line, I think of what I understand is just the same question we have to figure out as lawyers that everybody really has to, almost every person in this world, is how do you take down the master's house with the master's tools? Because we know officially we can't.
I was just going to say the thing about lawyers, and I say this to my students. One of my students really fought me a long time on this. She's like, I want to be the same person I was before law school. It's that can't happen. It cannot happen. I said, and the analogy when she had asked me this question or raised this issue, I said, it's like walking into a room and let's say, AS220 is doing a fundraiser and everyone's donating $5 and $7. And then Bill Gates comes in and sits in the back. And he thinks, I'm just here for the fundraiser. Everyone is looking at that person in a different way, right? And this happens to you, right? You go somewhere and they're like, the lawyer's here. The lawyer's gonna fix it. The lawyer, you do. But but I always say, and then people use you. They say, well, the lawyer said this. The lawyer said that. At Occupy, people used to come into the tent at Occupy Law School and go, tell them that I'm right. And we're like, we have no position on any of it. It was actually really good training. Chris will nod his head. It was really good training for us because I'm like, we are not, we can tell you, we can give you information. We take absolutely no opinion on whether, there are so many issues. Oh my God. Someone came in and asked us, they go, can I protest naked with a, what do you call that rain stick that makes the noise?
Ring stick.
Oh no, what's the one that didgeridoo. It was didgeridoo. I got the ring stick didgeridoo. Someone was like, I want to protest naked in front of the Boston Fed with a didgeridoo. I might be conflating two different people, but something like that. It was definitely naked. And we were like, we have no position on that. We have no position whatsoever on that. And that mostly, for the most part, almost did happen. More than once. The suggested action. I think the person was wearing a little but I think it's hard for us to do that because all the people who go to law school have that. Yeah, I talk a lot. Yeah, I can argue a lot. Yeah, I have a lot of political positions on things. But I think the danger in that is the other analogy I'll say that I use with my students a lot is, and upcoming lawyers and legal workers is, we're like a chauffeur. We have a skill, and we can provide that skill. And we don't tell the person, oh, you shouldn't go to New York today, or it's better if you do this, or why are you going? We say, it's my job to drive you to New York. That's my job, right? I can tell you, like, we need to put air in the tires, or we need a little bit of gas before we get there. But it's up to the movement to say, what can you do for me? And to provide them some information. Hey, we need some air in the tires, and we need to get a little bit of gas. And if we drive over 100 miles an hour, we're probably going to get pulled over by the police. But that's our job. And sometimes we stretch and pull as much as we can on the law, and to let people know, I think, because people's minds have been infected by TVs and nice fatherly judges, and they believe, like, if a judge just hears this, they'll just agree with me. And I'm like, oh, that person is the devil. and they were a prosecutor about 3 weeks ago, and they were terrible with that. The prosecutor is more on our side than the judges. So I think bringing that information to people, and I think I use the chauffeur analogy a lot to say, like, we have a specific thing that we do, and everyone who's a lawyer in this room has had people ask them a question, and you've answered it. And you had absolutely no right answer. It was not your field. It's like if you were, plumbers are good at this. Plumbers are like, electrical, I'm a plumber. You don't want to ask me about electrical things. And if I had one piece of information for people doing the legal work, is we should stay in the lane of that thing, of saying, we're here to give people legal information, to give people legal training, to file cases, to not file cases sometimes if it's not there. To figure out tactics on litigation, and stay in that lane, right? And do it at midnight, at 3 o'clock in the morning, to be available for people and for organizations as much as we can. And sometimes even if it's not our area of law, to go back and figure it out. Like if you're a chauffeur, you've driven the Bentley, but you haven't driven a Rolls Royce, get a book, read the book, figure it out, and give people that information. But it's also very hard. No one is going to be, I'm not perfect in doing that. And I've heard myself talking to myself saying, you're doing the thing that you told people not to do right now. But I think we try to stay in our lane for that.
Yeah, I think that, and I want to toss out, because the thing that, the Know Your Rights question made me think of, and in terms of lawyers, and particularly new lawyers often struggling with. So when the immigration clinic had recently started at Roger Williams, and that's when I was at ONA, and what's her name? Wonderful person. They had Mary Hope, that's it. So she was heading it up, and she brought a bunch of students, like, look, can I bring my students to be a Know Your Rights? And I'm like, that's when I was like, the lawyers, because I wasn't one yet. Like, why do they think they know more than we do? Like, so, but I liked her. She was being really helpful to us. So like, okay, fine, free training for your students will be nice. And maybe you'll take some of the cases we need. So she brings the students in, they do their like nice presentation, and they were so earnest, right? And and then somebody just raises their hand and says, and says, well, what do you do if they've been emphasizing like, now they are not allowed to come in your house without a warrant, right? So everybody knows that's true, right? They're not allowed to come in your house without a warrant. Great, we're all set then, thanks, we're glad we cleared that up. And somebody just kind of raises their hand, very humble person, and says, well, what do you do if they come in anyway? And the students were like, oh, but they can't. Like, don't worry, we fixed that for you, we fixed that. And like, the thing is, that guy, like 3 weeks previously, they had busted into his house and Mary, because she knew, she was like, oh. So, but that is very much sort of the like, you know, here's the Constitution, you know, I had to take out the word not from the shall not be violated, now it just says shall be violated. Yeah, one particular child from one of our very great liberal, thanks for holding me back from doing more, Mike, from one of our great, wonderful liberal judges, right? So, but so yeah, I want to toss that. Oh, and one other point too to think about that's a very important reality, and I think makes the whole like one reason why it's not a category on LinkedIn is that the economics of the law of legal work of the legal system, right? So if you want to rep people who are charged with crimes who can't afford a lawyer, you have to do it through a system that's going to fund you, right? Unless you're just, you know, Bill Gates, you know, hooked you up, which is awesome, but that's not usually going to happen. So that means if you're in Rhode Island, you have to deal with having, God, I don't know how many, 100 and some cases at any given time.
It's over 100.
Over 100, yeah, over 100. I think I've heard 120, 150 even. Yeah. If you're in Mass, maybe you have to deal with a judge who's going to be racist and sexist to you because he doesn't like you being too fierce to defend your clients. If you're in any other state, or maybe you have to deal with being a court-appointed lawyer and like they don't want to actually pay you for your work, so you have to make the difficult choice of going on strike or withholding your labor to make it more fair. So that's on that end. Then if you want to go into like, the law is so whack, so you know, yay, so the police, that's great. The officers don't ever have to pay a penny almost anywhere because almost every place they're indemnified, right? So they get paid for their time going to deposition. I always ask them, are you getting paid for your time here today? Yes. And you know, they find out how much and the depot finished early and they're still getting paid for the next 3 hours, right? So it's easy for them, the law favors them, it's so rare that we win. So if, right, understandably, an entity that's operating under capitalism and has bills to pay, even if you get a little raggedy storefront office, let alone if you want to make it kind of look nice and let your clients feel like they're sitting in someplace nice, those cases will not pay the bills. There's, you know, a few amazingly successful lawyers out there who are able to make it work, but even then, it's because they have to turn down 1 million more cases that aren't so likely to win, or if they do, aren't going to get damages. And that, I think, is maybe the most frustrating part of any of it. You know, an organization might be able to hustle some grant money to do it, and then you can only take X amount of cases on these themes because they're related to what you got the grant money for. You know, same legal services, what they can't help people who don't have legal status for, you know, there's the economics of the legal system is part of, I think, what limits our ability to be useful.
I was just going to say the other part of it, do tell me what you think about this. This is going to be a question more than it is an answer. Most of the people that I know, most of the places where I see the fallout of people in law school doing things that when they came to law school, they don't want to do, is mostly just, it's a little bit of cowardice. Like, people are just like, oh, but, you know, I have loans. And I'm like, I don't know. I personally don't know. Maybe someone in the audience does, or maybe you do. Anyone who went to law school and then there was like, I can't eat. I can't afford, I can't live. You can make it, people can make it happen, right? And that is, you know, being a public defender for some time, or working at, you know, maybe a small firm, or starting something your own, or getting very underpaid doing contract public defender cases in Massachusetts, or having 1 million cases in Rhode Island. I think the thing is, there's 1 million lawyers, and anytime I ever go to like a lawyer event, just a lawyer event, there's no adjectives before it, Every single time. I don't know. I should get mad at myself because I'm always surprised. I'm like, wow, lawyers are assholes. Like, just assholes. I went to the Massachusetts Bar Association. It's a big deal thing.
Oh, well, there you start out with a disadvantage anyway, Mass.
Oh, yeah, that was the actually before Mass. Yeah, before. So we went to, a friend of ours was, someone from the ACLU that was doing incredible work, was getting the, nice lawyer of the year award or something. So I was like, I have to go, right? And I'm like, wow, my dad had intermission on it. I was like, wow, these are just lawyers. Yeah. It is a lot. But so many people, I think, start. It's certainly the very small minority of people who go to law school actually believe in justice and want to work for it. But probably half of them get disillusioned through the process or hypnotized. They say, oh, I can do this, or oh, I can do that, or I can do that and make a lot of money. And I just say it for numbers. I mean, students that go to schools like Cornell or Harvard or Yale or Stanford, they get out, and people know what the starting salary is for like a lawyer at AM 50 law firm right now. Someone say no.
6 digits at least, right?
250,000.
250,000. Right? And then they go, oh, wait, I can help the world. I get paid $250,000. And then they decide by the 3 years they're in, they go, I have to do this. And people say this, they go, I have to do it because I owe money. How much money do you owe that you need a job making $250,000 and your ass is 25 and a half years old?
Get a roommate.
Yeah, but through that whole process, you know this, through that whole process, you see, you're like, oh, you just moved to New York and you just get an apartment. And your suits are $800 or $1,000 each, and your shoes more than that. And you start to live, because they hypnotize them with this lifestyle. They go in the summer and they're like, oh, you get paid whatever it is, $5,000, some preposterous amount of money. And they come back after the summer and they're like, oh, look, you're all groomed down, you have very nice shoes on. And it's part of this capitalist system. They just grind it into them. They're like, you must do this. Everyone must do this. I just had a student tell me, they said, I have to do this because you get really good experience at a big law firm. And I was like, we're public defenders. I was like, how fast you get your first case to trial? You could be in 3 months, and you're doing a jury trial in front of a bunch of people, opening and closing. And sometimes, when we started at the public defender's office, someone might be there with you. It's like someone might be there with you. They're just like, there's no training wheels on this bike, kid. You just go. And I'm like, how do you think you can get more experience? But there is this thing that people say like, oh, I would like to do this because I'll get experience. Like, I want to clerk because I'll get experience, or I want to work at a big law firm. I was like, they're going to put you in a room. 20 years ago it would have been a bunch of cardboard boxes. Today it's a bunch of PDFs, and they'll be like, there's 250,000 PDFs here. We need them all organized by keywords. Have at it. 90 hours a week. Put it in the building. But that part of capitalism really eats away at people, and because people have been hypnotized by it, before in their lives and afterwards. I think it makes it really hard to. It's the most depressing thing about my job is seeing people who actually care and they go, yeah, I'm going to do this. It ain't going to work for you. And sometimes I feel really bad because it might work. They might go, oh, I'm going to stay here the rest of my life. Good for you.
It's kind of like when the police have those undercover people and then they just lose them to wherever they're doing the undercover work.
Oh my God, that's a great. I'm using it. I use that.
It's actually, it's an interesting, though, that is, for me, the analogy is you start talking about like the lawyers being assholes, and of course my mind put the M right out of that. Sorry. But I will often, when I'm trying to sort through clarify to people that it's, for me, it's hate the game, not the player, as far as police, unless the particular player deserves it, which of course many do, but wait and let you prove yourself. I'll try to explain to people no, it's just some professions tend to attract more assholes than others. And I give the example, I even say lawyers, for instance, right? To just try to disarm them a little bit. But then it's also too, the profession and what you just described, I think is key, Carl, that the profession makes you more of an asshole than you were to start with. So it's a very similar thing. Yeah, and it's real. I don't want to, I have 3 kids and their father died right after my first year of law school, so I'm not trying to underestimate, the challenges of it, just surviving financially. And I know there's people in this room that could be earning a ton more money working in something that's morally corrupt, or at least morally useless, if you're lucky, but more often morally corrupt and damaging. But the idea that sort of like wherever you're in, like if you're a teacher, you got to figure out how to pay your bills and make something good happen within, this like twisted, distorted education system we have. And you may decide I'm gonna go work for one of those nasty consulting firms that's trying to go, help try to privatize everything. But that is a choice about where to do. Carve out, if you don't think you can make it doing the work you want to do as a lawyer, then it probably doesn't make sense to be a lawyer, right? Is that, oh, you're gonna comment on that, Tim?
I got a question, actually. What are the sorts of cases, or what are the things that somebody who wants to spend a lot of their time or devote time to representing movements or trying to do actually helpful work for people, what are the cases they can find out there to actually try to do to keep themselves going, like concrete sorts of things that kinds of cases that are maybe like fee generating, or like what sorts you can do to bring in money to help sustain maybe some of the more movement oriented work?
So, and this is an ongoing question. That's the perfect question. Yeah, I see the crew's back there, lifting his glass to that.
It's literally 4 hours ago.
Yeah. We have these dreams, for instance, we work at, and I love it, I'm, just doing plugs for Shannah Law, because when I left PrYSM, I was like, I gotta be able to focus and do a better job as a lawyer and get out of there, because it's taking, it's just eating up all the oxygen in the organization. And Shannah, the way I understood it, the way I explain it is, I had all these cases, but I can't give up my clients. They're just starting or in the middle, and they've been struggling so long for this, and I've been with them. I can't just dump them all. So I will always be grateful that Shannah Law said it was like being a mom with 18 kids and no money, and say, hey, can you take me in? And the firm said, okay, without fully maybe understanding how much money those kids are going to need when they hit middle school and high school and all that, but nonetheless stuck with it. Had great contribution and sacrifice from the firm. But the thing is, that forces the reality of, can we take these cases? So the fee generating question is really interesting, because that has so much to do with how we evaluate whether or not we can take a case. And I'm a little more like a baby at this and just learning it. But for instance, unemployment law, we want to know, is this going to have a Title VII claim, because that has fee shifting attached to it. For police stuff, in law school, I remember oh, perfect. I'll just do these cases. I'll get paid whatever my rate. I bill $300 an hour. Whoop whoop whoop. And our rates should go up. That's kind of low, I think, by our But you don't actually get that, because it's so hard to win, and because if you don't actually prevail and get to fees, then you're just using it to try to leverage the settlement value of your case. But if they know you're probably not going to win, then that really knocks down, or they know you're going to have to do so much work that maybe 6 years later you get your client gets some money. Literally, we settled a case a couple weeks ago that began with an arrest in 2016 and just settled a few weeks ago, right? So it's a great concept, but we still have these ideas, and I know we can figure it out. Maybe somebody here can help. If we could just get it more down to a system where it's we're going to do this, we're going to do that, we're going to do that, and be able to just get them in and out and just prevail, collect fees, and finance the next round. That's where people, anybody know more about, People's Law in Chicago, where they've made that model work, I thought, and maybe they did have some big batch of cash at the beginning, what we were researching it, because, we got to start that here. It's so theoretically possible.
I'm just going to say, just in knowing a little bit about folks at People's Law Office, Jim Haas was a member of a board of directors where I worked before, and he's a friend, and is one of the 2 founders of People's Law Office. They had roommates and lived like that in like 73, 74. And I'll just say, because I think it's actually the most movement lawyering moment in all of history. The People's Law Office, for people who don't know, is a radical movement lawyering law firm in Chicago that's done amazing work for many decades now, almost 5, more than 5 maybe, decades. But before, Jeff Haas was I think he did housing law, and he also did some stuff on the side. And one of the things he did on the side was he was representing Fred Hampton in a criminal case. And I think they had won the case and they were walking out and Jeff Haas was like, I have to go back to my job now, the real job I have. And a 19-year-old Fred Hampton asked him, he's like, what do you do besides defend us? And he said, well, I do this, I think it's housing law. He's like, I do this housing law, I work for this, thing. And he goes, you should not do that anymore. You should just defend us. That thing on those stairs at that time was what founded the People's Law Office. A 19-year-old kid just said, stop fucking around doing that other stuff and defend us. And they were like, we should. And I tell my students that all the time, and I'm like, that's this visionary moment where people are like, and also, they had the benefit of having personally Fred Hampton say that. I think he was like, oh shit, maybe we should, which might have been a terrible idea. It actually might have been, looking at all the facts, that might have been a terrible idea, but it didn't. It worked out to be, they've done such amazing, we could list all day, we could list the things that the People's Law Office has done, and also, the other people they've inspired through their work. But I think sometimes those things, they have to be sort of brave in that and say, let's see if we can hold our breath. And in the beginning, I think the first big settlement they had was in his assassination, the assassination of Fred Hampton case. That I think, I don't know that, but I think mathematically that might have been the first big check, and that did not come quick. But ever since then they've done, they got reparations for people in Chicago for the Burge, of people, it's a long story, but police torture for decades. And they got massive amounts of money. There's a monument now in Chicago about that. I think in Chicago schools, you must teach Chicago public school students about the fact that the Chicago police tortured black, brown, and poor people. I've never even heard of that. I've never even heard of anyone asking for that anywhere else. But I think part of it is that, and I'll say, I worked at nonprofit. I was a little bit private in the middle, taking cases for a bit. I work for state public defender. I think there's a lot of places that we can be, and we should be in all of those places that we can, effectually change, radical change for social justice, because we need a lot of it. So I think people should, one of the things I say to my students and to law students and upcoming lawyers, that people should be creative and brave. Back in the day in Massachusetts, all these guild people, in the early 70s, I'd say, they just got out of law school and they're like, we're going to found the Women's Law Collective. And there were all these law collectives that nobody would ever think of that now. They just think I work for a nonprofit, I'm going to work for the government, I'm going to work in academia, I'm going to clerk for a judge, I'm going to work at a big firm. If you ask anyone in law school, think of anything that's outside of these 4 things. I can't imagine it.
Boutique firms, they say.
Yeah, big firms and boutique firms. That's the most radical thing you can do. I'm going to work for not a giant law firm, but an incredibly rich one.
The unions.
Yeah. Oh, unions.
And what's beautiful though is I didn't realize until you said it right now that the Chicago torture reparations movement, that the lawyers played a big role in that actually. And a fan from afar of People's Law Office. But I heard one of the organizers speak on it at some point, and just blown away and overwhelmed at just the power of the people moving that. And maybe then that's part of the success is that they didn't take up all the oxygen in the room. They didn't take over the story. If you didn't know them and know their work, you might not have even known about how important their role was. And to me, that's really beautiful, because I think the lawyers like, we did a good job in summer 2020. I mean, given the circumstances, we did, right? We did as good a job as we could in the summer of 2020 and helped save a lot of people from worse circumstances and just like the psychotic, like, policing of protests during that time, I think did finally, like, we were able to nip some things off of that, but the only reason we could do some of that really good work is because there was actual movement happening, right? And we were the tail wagging after the dog. You know, people knew to call us, they knew what they needed from us, they knew what to ask us, and then we figured out how to get that ready and make it happen. And more and more as we did that, they'd know, okay, give me the list of bail commissioners. I'll start calling the JPs to get them to come out tonight, right? So it didn't have to be Allison like calling or me calling at midnight. You know, it was people like took over a lot of that work and those skills. I mean, maybe one of the things we could do, at least in terms of like using the legal system to go after police or the 1983 stuff, maybe the secret is helping develop people's ability to file their own stuff pro se. You know, I was gonna say it's not that hard, but that's like totally a lie. But we're not having such great success with it either. I mean, are they gonna do that much worse? I mean, I don't know.
One of the things, so I've defended a lot of the Palestine protesters, I'll call them anti-genocide protesters, and a lot of the ICE, I wouldn't say ICE interveners, but people who are concerned about what ICE is doing in our communities. I got really frustrated when someone was saying, how come our cases haven't been dismissed already? I'm like, there's like 35 of you, we've been to court twice, what do you mean? They're like, all the other people's cases got dismissed. And I was kind of at first frustrated, and then I was like, oh wait, you just expect us to walk into court the first time, and you to literally walk in, call the case gets dismissed, and you walk out, everyone claps themselves in the back, puts their keffiyeh on, and takes a group picture outside. Because, and the reason you think that is because a bunch of other people have gotten that to happen. And now it's like the standard price. They're like, we go in, it gets dismissed, we go out, we go back and protest. And they were like frustrated, and I was talking to a bunch of people who were really frustrated. They're like, and I was representing them, and they were like frustrated with me. I was like, I like that you're frustrated. I like that the standard here is the case should be right from the beginning. We walk in and we walk out. And I was like, it's a good standard reset. Your case isn't going to get dismissed immediately. You need to relax, but we're going to work our ass off on it, and we'll probably get there. But at first I was sort of frustrated with this, and I was like, oh, actually this is a good thing that the standard that people think is, and it makes people more confident, right? They think like, oh, we can go, in our communities, on our campuses, set up tents, raise hell, stand against genocide and what these universities and colleges and art schools even are doing, public art schools, you pick which one that is in Massachusetts, are doing, and then people standing against it, and they feel more confident in that, as they should, right, as they should. So it's great that that's happening, and we want people to be more confident in that.
So I have a question. Oftentimes, as an attorney, you have this ethical duty to fight like hell for a particular client. Like, this is your client, you have an ethical obligation to that client. But as a movement organizer person, you might also feel an obligation to a broader movement. And you may have like an organization that has its own goals for building power, and yet you're trying to, perhaps in a particular circumstance, there's one person that got arrested. They have their own needs and their own goals. How do you reconcile the advocacy for your individual client versus advocacy for changing the world?
I'm going to answer your question by asking you a shitty, annoying question that you're not going to answer. You ready? What do you do when your client's a snitch? You have a big problem, right? You're like, oh crap, like this is my good situation. Also, I represent this person and I must put this person's values forward. Also, this really sucks. Also, I don't want to be a part of this. Also, I have to represent, I have a legal obligation, legal ethics. I always separate legal ethics from actual ethics. Yes, this circle is a lot smaller, this circle is a lot bigger. We all have a lot more of these. Yeah, and so I think it's that conversation. I'm not going to ask you if you've had that conversation, but if you've had that conversation, or if you've thought of it, or if you've talked to someone, a lawyer who's had that issue, you have to have a very complicated conversation where to some extent you might be trying to convince a person not to do a thing that they want to do, right? You also, in some ways, talking to a person to guide them with all of the ethical considerations of what they're doing, right? That is a very complicated set of things to do. And I think when we talk about movement, everyone's like, oh, it's impossible because there's movement goals and then there's goals. But you can just start a conversation with things a lot of our clients in a public defense situation maybe haven't thought about. Because you say like, oh, you have this, real example. I had a client who was charged with sex review. So this is a charge that people do for, they only arrest women for, doing, we'll say prostitution, right, in Massachusetts. And I had a long conversation with her and I said, oh, they only charge women in this. They never arrest men for it. And many years ago in Massachusetts, they changed the law to be called sex for fees. So the provider and the purchaser are charged with the same crime to make it gender balanced. But then they still just don't arrest women, right? So I said, I'm really interested in this. I really want to fight it on a gender issue. And my client's like, what? Can't I just get probation? And I was like, I want to talk to you about this. So I had a long conversation with her and I said, I want to make an issue of this. And she goes, it's going to take a long time, isn't it? I go, it's going to. And I go, and I kind of want to do this. You don't have to come with me to do it at all. We can go in there, we can get you a fairly good deal. And she's like, let's see how it works out. You work on it from basically to the first day in court. I went in, I remember her name to this day, it was like almost 20 years ago. They called the case, and this is like maybe the third or fourth time. Every other time she would like creep up because the prosecutor would always make sure to read what the charges were unnecessarily. They called her case. I'm gonna do it. She walked up and she went like this. And stood at the podium. And I was like, holy shit, she's proud right now that she's standing here in these charges because we had a long conversation about making it a gender issue. And she's like, I'm standing up for women here, right? And women like me. And I was standing there, I'm like, I'm gonna go over here and weep for a minute, and then we're gonna fight like hell. I submitted at least 1,500 pages of statistics on sex refugee cases. And it was outrageous. There were like 4 that men were charged. And those were like when they arrested both people. Like one time there was a car pulled over, there were 2 men and a woman in the car. Cop pulls over and says, what's going on? Guy in the passenger seat says, we just paid her X dollars for X, 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 X. He completely admits a crime. She's just sitting in the back seat. She hasn't been a crime. They take her out of the car, arrest her, and they leave the 2 guys. See you later. Right? So I gave all of these examples, The judge is like, I'm not accepting any of these. I'm not accepting this data. I go, this data came from your clerk's office, judge. She's like, I'm not accepting this data. He goes, you want a plea? I'm like, ah. I go outside and talk to her. They give us a really good deal. She actually pleads to it. But she's like, thank you so much for trying to fight. No one's ever tried to do that. She goes, I've been arrested for this charge like 25 times. No one's ever tried to do it. We completely lost. But we didn't lose. We didn't lose because when she walked up, I was like, this is like just a different thing. And I think there's always these times we can dig into something in ways that it isn't like you wouldn't first think of it. And I'm not trying to say that it was most, actually I stole that idea from, I can't remember his name, but it's Quincy Lawyer, it's a fancy mustache.
Ben Salmon.
I think it was Ben Salmon, I thought it was similar, so I stole the idea. But I think there's so many places that we can try to do that. And it's always a tension. So I say to students and like new lawyers and medium new lawyers, although I didn't want to say old lawyers, that if you don't have some of that tension, whether it's like the financial tension or the like, can I do it with this firm, or can I do it with this, nonprofit, or can I do it with this educational institution? Like, Cornell loves that I'm working on a bunch of Palestine cases. They really love that. But then I just went to the death penalty clinic. I'm like, they're representing people who killed people, allegedly. I'm like, I'm just representing people who have flags. So I think there's always the tension of trying to represent your client directly for what they want, but then also talking to, because it's also similar to the way a union organizer does it, right? So a union organizer says, like, you should fight. Why? Because you have power and you should build your own power. And they're like, yeah, well, we want more money. And you're like, Bob, it is more money. It's about building the power. And you're like, but we want more money. And you're like, Both of those things. And I think for the union organizer and for the movement lawyer, it's not our job to tell people, but it's to say there's more options than you think, and I'd like to talk to you about that.
Yeah, I like that description, because and that makes me think of, going back to sort of like the early days in DARE with that, very rigid, what do you call it? What's a doctrine? It's like, what's it, a religious belief? Oh no, that's legal too, right? But that this is that individual work one-on-one is not meaningful, or doesn't matter, or doesn't factor in. I mean, if you get the chance to have that discussion, I think it's critically important. I mean, I've had to like sort of figure out, sometimes I want to really be able to talk about race because I think the court needs to hear it, because it's so like glaringly obvious and fucked up in the situation. And my client is really nervous, and okay, you're gonna have to face the consequences, I'm not, and that's okay. But I think them knowing that it's there, that it's recognizable, and then maybe I can pull this one piece or make this one reference or something, or they'll be able to, at least when they're describing it or somebody's talking to them about it, what happened, or they're ready for next time maybe sometimes, So I think that's just part of that eternal tension around how do we build a movement. That same tension should exist in every kind of work that we're doing that we need to be movement work, right?
Just because you guys have. Do other people have questions?
Yeah, I kind of figured we were going to blah, blah, blah for like 10 minutes, and then the rest was going to be
Are we just
questions discussion.
You ask Chris what he thinks. Chris, what do you think?
Yeah.
I think they're also for the public defender-ish in the crowd. I think there are always these trends of things that are happening. I actually just want to get a bunch of these cases right now. I want to defend a whole bunch of shoplifting cases. I want to get like 10 shoplifting cases, because everyone has this like ill-informed thing that, everyone's going and stealing stuff from stores, that's why everything's behind plastic, and they're closing all the CVS's and the Walgreens, and it's because people steal. I'm like, okay, crime is at a pretty all-time low right now, and the reason those stores are closing is because they have a shitty business model of selling drugs to sick people and not making any money on all the other stuff they sell. And now there's this thing called Amazon, and sick people can get drugs delivered to the house, which is a lot easier, especially if you're utterly mobile. And so they just had a shitty business model that just didn't survive the times. Not that Amazon is great or anything. And they're all closing. And the companies say this, right? In their perspective, in their business models, they're like, yeah, we need to do something different. We should start doing it. But I was in court and I heard this judge say, oh no, you're doing a thing that's really bad for the community. You shoplifted, whatever, it was something really minor. You shoplifted this, all these stores are closing. You're making it hard for the black and brown community. I'm like, no, this is not what's happening. And I want to have just someone shoplifts like tuna fish, and I'm going to be like 150 pages, like from every.
For volunteers.
Yes. If someone takes some of those cases in any state and wants a bunch of students to write up 250 pages and get every prospectus from every company, we'll write that and be like, here, give it. Because this judge explicitly said, we're going to start taking these more seriously because of this thing. Yeah, he said we. Yes. But I know, and this is like I would say center-right judge, like not even like very right. And I'm like, this is deranged. Like, you're just wrong. You just have not even bad information on law. You just have bad information on fact, which are demonstrably not true. Just demonstrably not true. And I think there's a whole bunch of issues like that. When I actually first started being a public defender, a coworker of mine who's no longer a lawyer did this thing, which is this massive. Actually, all of the training materials on trespass law in Massachusetts have to do with this. Like, they would just say, like, you're a trespass, like it's a Harry Potter magic wand, like, you're trespass, so you can't go on any Boston housing property. In some neighborhoods, like every other every third brownstone is Boston Housing Authority, and there's no way you would know, right? This kid walked through a back parking lot, and they were like, oh, it's Boston Housing. And he's like, how would I know? It's not why I walked to the store. Like, I wouldn't know that. And he got arrested for it. And they were like, yeah, but it is. And so I think there's a lot of issues, I think small issues that we can attack on, on fronts, as as public defenders, as criminal defense lawyers, and provide that those attacks about bringing in sort of social science, things that are going on in the world, and a little bit, not all of it, because your political understanding of it, if you put that in front of the court, they're going to freak. So you just give them a little, concentrate a little, just a shot.
Little just as samples. Yeah.
And also, I'll just say the other thing, as my brother always says, it's like knowing your audience. Like some judges you can say, like I've said things that if I said off in front of the judges, they would. Well, I've had ripped off before, but sometimes you can put it in front of one judge that you wouldn't be able to put in front of another, and then that sometimes gets to be the way people start thinking about things.
Yeah, the environment. I've had a judge that I think is one of the best, or maybe even one of the better, maybe one of the best ones around race analysis. Like when I brought up where I thought it was really clear the landlord was being really racist, making fun of the way this Cambodian family cooked their food, and their stove was freaking spotless, and he needed to give him back the security deposit, because their house they left it spotless. And she didn't want to hear it when I brought up that point at all. But I think, one of that approach of what you were talking about, I think it makes it all the more like just movement lawyering, like we need it to be a much more sort of amorphous, loose term, right? So like the idea, like, the day like it clicked in my head, one of those times when somebody said, the revolution isn't something that's going to happen on a particular day or month or something, and explain that this is just the revolution is something we have to live and build and breathe and try to experience and create every single day in everything we do. And I think that's the same with lawyering, right? Or with anything we're doing, is that we have to put the movement into it wherever we find ourselves any way we can get. If somebody's working at a really rich law firm and they're able to pull their client in aside and like cuss them out because of something evil they want to do, I guess not like that's gonna happen. I probably watch too much TV, but like one of my greatest heroes, Dawn Huntley, Rhode Island legend. She will have the fight with a family court judge who is so nasty and racist and dismissive to her client, and she will just fight. She doesn't care. I mean, I think somebody put her in a holding cell at one point, and so what? The sheriff loves her, everybody loves her, and they bring her back upstairs. So it's kind of so I think it's like where we can, any place anybody can move something or push a point, and with Chris's advice in mind, know your audience. Some of us have to learn how to speak much less didactically and be able to like start from where somebody's out. I mean, the same way we're supposed to do, if you go home to visit your family and they say some fucked up things, what are the practical, constructive ways of talking with them versus what are the ways that are just going to make them shut their ears? And I know there are people out there who are good at that, so we should have them come and teach some of us who aren't as good at that how to do it too. Because that I think is how, it's the same things all of you try to do in every situation, not just in court or in your brief or something. Right?
I do see people, litigators do that amazingly badly. I once saw, I'll just say another war story, but I saw two people arguing, it was a motion they were trying to get the defense attorney was trying to get some DNA from a bar fight tested, and there was like a DNA sample that was seemingly not associated, so I want to get it tested. And they're in front of, I'm going to say this without being ageist, they were in front of a judge who understood science, I will say from the late 1970s, not from this millennium. And they were arguing like a lot of technical scientific details about DNA and what it could show. And the judge kept saying, so if you get the blood type, what will it show? And then they're like, well, if you get the DNA and the alleles match, and he goes, okay, so when you test the blood, then you'll know the blood type. And I was like, he has no idea what they're talking about. They're talking about DNA, he's talking about A, B, O negative. And he's either not listening or not understanding, or both of those things. I think it's both of those things. And I was like, wow, whoever explains this in the crayon version is gonna win. And that lawyer was, I was very junior at the time, I was so tempted to go like, you have to slow it down for him. He doesn't know what you're talking about. Like you have to say, DNA, this is the structure. And I was really stuck, and they argued the whole thing. He's like, I'll take this under advisement. Like, what is going to be under advisement? You don't know what's going on. And that actually was a very telling moment for me to say, yeah, if you, because they were talking, like, just completely talking over his head. And I think we do this in community all the time, right? You say things, and like, we say things like lawyers, and nobody wants to hear that. For the most part, nobody wants to hear that.
I don't want to say the other question. So lately, I know you get it a lot. I'm sure it will resonate with my audience here. To that, the thing of delving in as a lawyer too deeply into the movement because you're the lawyer in the room, the lawyers are in the room, and so people will say, is this legal? Can we do this? Can we do that? Which is always, it depends, and yes, you can be arrested for it. But then people want to say, especially in the immigration context, I've seen it a lot, is this risky? Is this dangerous? How risky? So now we're like risk assessment calculators. And there are, I think, some places where we know, like maybe as criminal defense attorneys, like, yeah, cops will be arresting you for that. Or, no, they're probably not going to arrest you for that. So there's a little bit, I think, sometimes that we can do, but I'm like wondering like how you approach that when people go like, can we do this action safely?
But see, that's the thing that's funny where I wouldn't even think that people can ask a lawyer. Well, I mean, people do ask lawyers, right? But that the lawyer shouldn't necessarily be the one to action, because that's going to be more like, okay, here's what's happened the last 3 times somebody did something similar, and so based on that, I mean, because you're predicting not just what the legal, I mean, they could do all kinds of stuff legally, right? Just like make up shit on their report and whatever, and they got their probable cause, and so it's trying to predict what they will do, right? Which is not a legal question. Like if somebody had asked me a year ago, am I safe going into district court for a driving without a license case? A year ago I would have said, I mean, you're never 100% safe, but it hasn't been happening. If somebody asked me 6 months ago, I would have been like, I'd be kind of nervous. It seems like it's been happening. Somebody said today, I'd be like, no, make them do some visual hearing. Make them give you a video hearing. Do not go, even if you're surrounded by people who are going to protect you, So, I mean, I don't know if that's a question as much for the lawyer. I want to tack one thing onto what you were saying, Carl, too, about the explaining it simply, too, because I think in those situations of the tactical analysis, you got to explain it simply, too. But anybody see the movie Philadelphia? Okay, so Tom Hanks is the client. He's being discriminated against because in the very early days of AIDS, he actually has the disease. He's got it's active, and he this big fancy law firm tries to fire him. So Denzel Washington plays the like storefront lawyer who's like not exactly being admired in his community for defending this like rich white gay guy, but the way he had he would say it to people on the stand. I think he goes, explain it to me like I'm a 6-year-old. And I'll tell my clients that whatever before they're gonna, while we're practicing testimony. But that's actually, I think we got to remind ourselves that. Explain it to them like I'm a 6-year-old.
I would do this in the beginning of a lot of cases. I would say, it's my job to make sure that you understand it. If you don't understand it, you should ask me. It's your duty to ask me, and it's my duty to check in with you to see if you understand it. Because all these things, it's like we applicants. The most complicated thing in the world, but like, motion to suppress, not the most complicated thing in the world. Probable cause, not the most complicated thing in the world. You could explain this to most people. But I think we don't, and we have a tendency to, lapse into, I don't know, how would you answer your, second semester, first year law school civil procedure professor, or you would talk to an appellate federal court about it, and that's not the way we should talk to people.
But also they're telling our clients to explain it to those people who don't understand anything about their experience. Like you got to start them and put them in kindergarten before you tell them about X, Y, Z. They don't. Right? We have to do it with judges, I think.
The other thing is, because you're saying about immigration, is I think we failed this. Like movement lawyers, activists, people who do so-called know your rights trainings have failed terribly at this because we just tell everyone about warrants. They're like, warrant, this is a warrant, this is an administrative warrant, they can't use this warrant to come, they can't use it. Now everyone's in the street screaming at ICE, it's good, screaming at ICE, saying like, do you have a warrant? And then people are like, you don't have a warrant, therefore you can't. therefore, I don't know, I can tackle you in the street. And I think the real politique of it, these are a whole bunch of mostly men with guns and pepper spray and trucks and radios and clubs and whatever, and attitudes. And you see people doing wild things. So I think here's what an administrative warrant is, here's what a judicial warrant is, here's what a violent, proto-fascist, also person that you literally almost have no way of knowing their name, their badge number, even what agency they work for, the likelihood that this person can be held in any way accountable. If we haven't done that, that should be step 3. So I will say that now. Step 3 in all so-called New York training should be like, this person is like a wild animal, they can easily hurt you. Could that person kill someone and probably get away with it? It's probably a pretty good bet that can happen. And I think we haven't done that sort of risk, as you were saying, Chris, the risk assessment about that part. Like, we need to be a lot better about it. And we know that. We knew that. Did anybody think that couldn't happen? Dude's like, what's your name? They're like, I don't give you my name. You're like, and you see, the thing that was in Worcester, there's a guy standing there, and he has like an AR-15, just standing. I'm like, oh, you brought a machine. There's a 16-year-old kid and her mother that you're in an infant, you're reporting. There's a guy standing on the street, like safety finger, but like finger next to the trigger on a fully automatic weapon. I'm like, well, okay, that's great. And he has a lot of clips because he'd be able to shoot 100 people. But we, I think, should understand the risk of that.
So I have another question, if I can. Sometimes trying to build movements for radical change, people get arrested. And we feel like in order to build a movement, we want to defend those people that were arrested doing political work, advocating for something. But we also know there are a bunch of other people who were arrested just living their lives. They're, living in poverty and just trying to survive. And sometimes it feels like, prioritizing the person that's doing the political activism gets arrested. Maybe you're not paying as much attention to all the other folks that are in the same jail cell. How do you balance that in movement work?
I mean, I'd love to hear if there are other people in the room who had to figure that out too. Because I want to know, it's hard.
I'm gonna say, I was defending some people, I won't say the name of the organization, but defending a bunch of folks in Boston who were doing environmental action. And it was a lot of people. And we were sitting in the hallway outside the clerk's office, a very narrow hallway, and a bunch of black and brown people were coming down the hallway because it was like 9 o'clock in the morning, everyone's checking in. And one of the activists who's there, who I'm representing, goes, oh, they said quietly to each other, they go, oh, get out of the way, they're real criminals are coming.
Wow.
Nothing, no irony, no nothing, just facts. And I was like, ugh. I was like, is it beyond ethical requirements if you kill your client? And I was like, my skin was like tingling. Like I was like, oh my God. I'm like, okay. And I was like, here's the thing. Those people are here because of a political, economic, and racialized structure that exists in this country. And they were forced to be here. I'm going to point to you. You are here because you decided to be here. So they're here for a political reason. You're here for a political reason. The impact on them is a lot more than it is on you. And I say, but there's a good thing that you're doing. This idea of like go to court, jam the system up. You actually, if you're here and you're respectful about it and you fight your case, it actually helps. It is an aid to other people, right? Because this courthouse can't have more than 4 trials in a day. So those people, our allies, their brethren, siblings in this, and we should also, just as they have respect for you, we should have respect for them, and we should understand the position that they're in. And sorry, my hair out. That's why I have my hair now. But also it was, I freaked out when the person said it. I was very sad. But then I sort of explained it and said, we're all in this together. You need to relax a little bit. But also I think sometimes, maybe going against what I was saying before, sometimes I think being the lawyer gives you the ability, because that needed to be said, right? It just needed to be said. And I would have expected people to be a little bit more politically aware of that. But they weren't, right? And I think to some extent it puts us in a position where we can actually, if people doing racist, sexist, classic, homophobic, transphobic, colonizer mindset shit, we could be like, nah, bro, you can't do that, right?
It's funny because when I was first out of law school and so working with PrYSM on this project, I kind of felt like all right, I was doing for my criminal defense mostly just misdemeanor cases, but it generally involved some kind of police going way past police being racist and targeting somebody, using excessive force or arresting them, picking a fight to try to arrest them and doing that. So it was a very, I always felt like those were very political cases, very important political cases. To the court that was just, one more obnoxious, kid who got uppity, not knowing his place and was the sort of misdemeanors. But somebody being able to challenge, no, this stupid misdemeanor, I'm not just going to take a filing because it was wrong, because they shouldn't have arrested me because I didn't break the law. And they might have been obnoxious when they were talking to the cops. They might have been not safe about, they weren't taking that risk analysis into account. But the fact that they didn't do anything illegal and they're getting arrested because of who they are and where they were, when I can be 10 times more obnoxious and not get arrested, and usually really nice and get arrested, but who knows. But so I always felt like those cases were very important political cases, right? And especially when we were able to, the person wanted to connect with other folks in PrYSM around, Cop Watch or doing just support group stuff. And I would get, some people might say they would not be wrong, kind of a chip on my shoulder about defending I know Ben's being very polite and not, saying, yeah. But I would get a chip on my shoulder about defending the protesters who I felt did make sort of a conscious decision and had the option, right? So when I would get arrested, I had every time I've gotten arrested since I was 20 years old, let's just leave it at that, I did have the option of just walking away and they weren't going to arrest me, sooner, or I could have walked, maybe I should have, sooner or later would identify that point, but I had the option to not be in jail, to not be charged with a crime and everything. And that made it such a different thing than your only plan was, it's not like I went out planning to get arrested no matter what they think, because that is one of the things they say, that's my game. But yeah, the people jump in front of the cars, right, to get as many car crashes as you can. My son's friend's uncle actually was doing that pretty successfully. Anyway, but it's but the idea though that there is a difference, and yes, it's important, and yes, we want to make sure to challenge misapplication, and sometimes people weren't actually breaking the law at protests and got arrested anyway, right? But the fact that you're there, what reflects a choice that you had, that most of the other people that are there did not have a similar choice. They did something that you would have gotten arrested for, often, or at least caught.
I do want to say, this whole thing's got me thinking about when there were those cases in New Bedford of folks who were arrested and charged for blocking the jail about the immigration. And when the community supporting those defendants came to New Bedford District Court to do jail support, or to do court support, they made a conscious decision to do court support for everybody who was coming to court for that day as a defendant, not just for the 2 or 4 folks who were the protester, the political defendants, we'll say, even though that's a really terrible term. But the people who were arrested, that they were there ostensibly to support, they were there to support every defendant who came in that day. It was one of the most incredibly amazing things I've ever seen. And the court did not know what to do when
they were giving
how did they do it though? Yeah.
They had a table outside and they were giving hot chocolate to people. I was like, we got hot chocolate? Yeah. Right, we came down there just for hot chocolate. They had energy for Nature's Grain, or some snack bars. Yeah. And then they had a sign that said, court fees, we'll pay them.
Yeah.
I'm like, That's going to be a popular table.
Wow.
That table.
Yeah.
That was Fame, right?
Yes.
And
That was up there.
If we could figure out a way to like try to think about like lawyers, right? Take a lesson from that and try to figure out some way to replicate the court support thing for defendants in the district court in Rhode Island or Massachusetts. That would be an incredible thing.
Yeah, it's like bail, super bail fund.
Yes.
Right? Yeah.
People should just.
I just have the idea to Ben's question about that political versus non-political, like is that problematic, right? Not made that problematic. But in some ways, I think so. I work for a criminal defense clinic at the law school in Cambridge, and
This shall remain under.
and my students get excited. You know, I mean, they get excited about doing the bread and butter criminal defense work, right? But there is truth to the fact that there's uniqueness in cases, but there is also roteness to the cases, right? And that when you get a protester, a protester case or a political case, it's different, right? It's kind of like I got kind of this regular assortment of kind of standard fare district court criminal defense, and then this other thing that's different. So in some ways, leaving out the race class analysis of it and privilege maybe of the protester case, that or the way they turn out a lot is that it's different. And in some ways, I think it is a both and, because I'm like, I'll tell a student, I'm like, you can pick up one of these protester cases, and they'll almost invariably say yes, right? And I'm like, oh shit, it's gonna be more for me too. But I think we can all kind of cake that on top, right? Like, so do a little bit extra, and Carl independently does those, and I'm sure you do too. So it's not that we're neglecting the thing that we were doing before. It's the oh shit, like okay, this is going to be interesting, or I got to put in a little bit more work in this, and I'm going to do this extra thing. So I don't think it's we're going to do less of the bread and butter stuff that we were doing before, but that you're adding it on, and especially during like whether it's kind of now during the ICE raids and all of this, or in protests against that, or in 2020 Black Lives Matter, or whatever flare-up time it is, Occupy or whatever else, that there are those moments where people are kind of called upon to do like put that extra oomph.
And I'll just say even,
and it's not like we're leaving the other people behind.
Just right now, I have a lot of these in-betweeny cases, like the tangential case from the case that you mentioned in New Bedford, right? Someone was arrested when the verdict came out in that case. My client was arrested, that I got from Jim and from Lifu, was arrested for allegedly saying, "We love you, Sherry," in the courtroom, which, that's a good one. That almost beats the baby bottle assault battery case that I have. Which also my client didn't say. I'm representing someone, a mother of an activist right now that allegedly took a photo or video, we don't know, of a police officer in the hallway of court, and is charged with witness intimidation. And I think those, so there's like, is that a political case? Just like, she's mom, she's just mom. And the same thing in this case, it's like that person wasn't, even if they did the thing that they were accused of doing, and then dragged out and tackled, and I think there's some kind of in-betweeny things, and I think that's happening kind of because of the political landscape right now. That's happening more and more, right? Like one of the cases I'm defending in Worcester, and my client didn't go, it had no intention, and is still to this day surprised. I'm not surprised. She's surprised that she got arrested. And I think those are happening more and more. We need a name for those, the in-betweenies.
And maybe that then helps us sort of to take this whole, I totally lost the brilliant point I was going to make, but I mean the whole like everything is political, and like we have to be able to like find the politics in everything and respond, and respond accordingly. I mean it is exactly what you explained to your student. It is political that this person got arrested for, well, it's misdemeanor kind of sort of now, but like for whatever, possession of like this like really who cares amount of crack, and like kids doing all these drugs at Providence College. Second, they probably, the ones that OD'd, they probably didn't even get arrested. It was the two people they snitched on that sold it to them that got arrested, right? So or the 3 people, or whatever. But you know that it's kind of the the sort of the idea that everything is political and that there is a political content and value to the reason that each person's there, and then it just morphs.
So time check, it's almost 7 o'clock and we have to give AST their space back. But thank you, Carl and Shannah, so much. And did you have any final thoughts?
I mean, I've been enjoying talking so much and listening to Carl, and I probably covered everything that was on the notes that I totally forgot to bring with me, or forgot to write onto the notes in the first place. But I don't know, I would just love before, like, as we close, just to hear, like, sort of which of the points, I know there's so many nuggets of wisdom all around the room, whether or not they come from lawyers. So I don't know if I would love to just hear any thoughts that anybody else has kind of have been stirring in their minds before we leave.
I have a thought about the shoplifting that you mentioned earlier. There's a National Retail Association that pushes to enhance penalties, and they're basically pushing the story that that judge believes.
Yeah.
And they're doing that for political and economic reasons that have nothing to do with that judge or that case.
Right, no, that's definitely where he gets it from.
Yeah, exactly.
It is, many people believe it. I mean, it's a pretty easily believable thing, right?
Yeah. And it's been going on for at least 15 years as far as I know.
Organized retail theft.
Right, organized retail theft. That's what they call it, exactly. Yeah.
Someone with an MBA in a basement came up with that.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
like, that's awesome.
Yeah, it's the marketing risk.
I just want to say a thing. Carl came really close to touching on it. We've been doing like a lot of trainings for like ICE, watch kind of groups. And it is that thing, that the point about the warrants, and which is an important step 1, but what is the step 2? And the way that I started to describe it is like, people really think, and radical people think this too, radical non-lawyers, that it's like, I will state the law, and like this force field will come down from the Starship Enterprise, and like literally like knock the ICE agent back. You don't have a warrant. Boom! Right? Or, I'm on this sidewalk. This is not illegal. You cannot arrest me. And I'm like, I don't understand. You understand that the criminal legal system is corrupt and that it's rotten, it's good, it's racist, it's sexist, homophobic, transphobic. But somehow you think that violent actor that is very well protected, very well enabled, not even very good cops, ICE even worse, right? That you think that uttering some like weird magical incantation will really, literally, on that street with that guy with the machine gun, protect you. And I don't understand, like, I just think they haven't done the deeper thinking on that, even though these are people who are, like, really radicals. I think in training, that's incumbent upon us. Maybe it is, like, as Carl says, our failure, to be just like, bro, let me tell you, I know you know, sis, bro, you know that's not how this shit works, right? And really say it, like, out loud, that we understand consciously, that they might understand unconsciously, but consciously they don't, there's like a breakdown, and I don't, it's actually a learning point. Doing that training has been a learning point for me. Like that you really have to kind of take people a little bit back to basics. Like I've done it to people like who are like really like radicals, like stone cold radicals. Even in the forest defenders and Atlanta stuff, people are like,
I can't believe they arrested them.
what the criminal system is doing is, it's like, this is a corrupt court. I go,
Really? In Florida,
no, this is someone
Like
like
in Atlanta,
stone
Georgia?
cold anarchist. It's a corrupt court. I go, that's redundant. Like what? I didn't say that, but like I was just looking at them, like really surprised. I'm like, I've heard that from you before, that you know the system, your systems are corrupt.
And seeing it and doing it.
It's the desire
Judge
to do it.
Fortunato, long retired, great guy who actually, while a sitting judge, would talk about imperialism, not in court, but like during that time. And people would talk when we had him come in to do actually like a Know Your Rights training, and people would describe something that happened and say, "Can they do that?" And his response was always, "Well, they just did, so apparently they can." What you're asking is if they're allowed to do that. No, but can they do it?
The force field's not coming down from there,
Right?
I don't know what.
Yeah, first foot's broken today.
I talk a lot, and sorry if I generally can't closing. So there's an organization called Dream Defenders that people might know out of Florida. A lot of the work that they did, like the reason people know Trayvon Martin's name is because they were doing work like court anti-support for murderers. But they were doing a lot of work organizing around that and like around the verdict and all that. they also have always been really in solidarity with Palestine, even like way before. But they make, I said this before, they make the best T-shirt, the best activist T-shirt that's ever been made. But they don't make it anymore, so you really can't buy it. And it says, "I've been to the future. We won." That's the best shirt. No one's making a better shirt than that. That's just the best shirt you can get. And I don't have one. A friend of mine has one, and I'm trying to steal it from him. But so I think I always say that shirt is correct, right? We will win. And the thing that we need to win is to fight more like hell, be creative about it, be radical about it, stand in solidarity with people, and I know when to. Sooner, the more we fight them, right? And the more we do that radically. Like if we do that sooner, more radically, in solidarity with other people, and creatively, we will win, right? And so I think if we continue to do that, and we're brave in that, and we do risky stuff, not really risky, but pretty risky, things in the law, in communities, and in solidarity with people, we can beat them back because there's more of us than there are of them. And I'll just say, a student, they do the orientation for students in law school, and the Guild does, as people know, disorientation. And a student about 2 or 3 years ago asked a question, and some colleagues of mine said, "Oh," they were talking about whether they should work for a firm, whether they should, do public interest. And a colleague of mine said, "Oh, we know it's hard for you because you're rewarded so much more if you work for a firm." I thought it was stunning that the person chose the word rewarded. And I just went, when he said the word, and I didn't do it on purpose, but I go, "Oh, no. Not rewarded. You can say remunerated, and that would be correct. Rewarded, not." I go, "We are rewarded more. We do things that we care about. We do things when we put our head." My brother's quote was when he was doing his first work at law school, he can correct me if I'm wrong. He woke up and he was like, "Where am I?" And he was in Virginia doing death penalty work, anti-death penalty work, I should say. Woke up and he's like, "Oh yeah, I'm in Virginia. We get to do this." That's the quote. We get to do this, right? And it's like, there are so few people in the world that get to do shit that they think is important. We all get to do things that we think are important. Someone asked me if I love my job. I'm like, I think it's important work. And I'm good with that. And I can sleep well, I can wake up very well, a little bit slower than I used to. And I think we can do more. We can always do more. And it's inspiring, and we are rewarded far more.